Hey, everybody, welcome to the live podcast taping, I guess, the live podcast. We're doing both audio podcasts and a video podcast right here on YouTube. Thank you all for hanging out with me today. We're going to get started in a few minutes. We do this every Monday. I do this every Monday with help from the folks in the community. Going to see what we got here. We're going to do stuff a little bit different today. I got a little... You notice I'm running a little bit behind. We got a few different things going on. Some new equipment that I'm setting up as we speak. And I see Chris and Evan, David, both Davids. How's everybody doing today? First thing I'd like to ask you is to make sure, because I've got this new equipment going on, that my voice and the video are synced up together. So if anybody could send me a quick one in the chat if everything looks okay and is set up, I'd appreciate that. I'll put a little chat up here. Then we'll wait a minute for that to see if everything is working out good. Really fun week. I've been having a lot of time messing with my Pod HD 500X. We have a challenge going on, and this is the summer guitar tone challenge, and we're working on getting our own signature tone together this week. Thank you, Evan. I appreciate that. Good to see you. Thanks, Kevin. All right, everybody, we're in good shape. That's good. So we're working on shape, and one of the things that we were doing in the contest was to get your clean tone and your crunch tone and your lead tone together. Chris said slightly off, but only just. Okay, I'm gonna adjust that real quick before we go get started. So I'm gonna let's see here. So I've changed a little bit now. Let me know if I've added a little bit more. There's a way that you can offset the two. So maybe this one Chris says maybe a quarter of a second. So we'll wait for it, see if that changed things at all. And we have our clean sound, our lead tone, clean tone, lead tone, and our crunch tone. And you know, if you're new to guitar tone, or even if you're not, you know, really getting specific about those things before you start adding all the fun stuff like the reverbs and the delays and all of those. This is a good place to start. So Dean says I'm getting a delay. All right, so maybe I'll go back and fix what I just... Chris says okay. Okay, so we got one there. Delay. Okay, yeah, I've got some new stuff going on today. So it may take a minute or two to get everything started. Well, let's see here. Probably good enough. Dean says it's better. Okay, good. All right. So hopefully we're all straightened out there. So we're going to start the podcast up in a second, where we're going to be going through what a clean sound is, what a crunch sound is, what your lead sound is, and if you're not a lead player, what your big, heavy sound is. Maybe you're a rhythm player, plays metal or hard rock, and you need that over the edge sound, even if it's not for leads. So we're going to base those three together, and I'm going to get started in just a second because it looks like everything is working pretty well. All right. So let's get our music almost ready here. And if you've been here before, sometimes we do the intro once or twice. Depending. Okay. All right. Pressing record on everything. We got recording going. And we're going to get the intro going in just a second. Here we go. Figuring out your own signature tone is difficult for all levels of guitars. Getting your core tones down first before you start experimenting gives you a starting point for success. So stay tuned. Hello and welcome to episode 132 of the Play Guitar Podcast. I'm Lee, and this is the podcast that's determined to make you a better guitar player. No matter if you're just starting out or you've been playing for years, this is the show that will help you become the guitarist that you always wanted to be. Hey, I'm Lee. Well, so happy that you're here. Finding a good guitar tone that makes you happy, it's not as easy as you would think. Most guitars start off, they buy gear that looks good, gear that's in their price range, but you quickly find out that doesn't guarantee success. Then it becomes a quest, the search for the ultimate guitar tone for you, well, at least the best tone that you can afford. Soon, the frustration sets in and you spend a huge chunk of money and you're probably less than satisfied with your tone. What you need is a process, a place to start, a good platform that you can build many great tones from. Today, I'm going to go over the concept of having your 3 core tones and the best way to build them. Your clean tone. Let's start with that first. What makes a good clean tone? This is a question I actually got from my friend David Saturday in our YouTube show, Guitar Talk, we have every Saturday. It's a good question to ask. You don't really think about that. Depending on the style, it can be the sound you build everything else upon. This is going to be your ground floor tone from your amp or from your modeler, whichever way you're working on that. Everything that you put before it, your guitar, your pedals, or your amp, or the amp drive, it's affected by it. It shapes everything. Clean tones don't sound, so boring when you start to think of it that way. What makes it clean? Well, that's pretty easy. It's the lack of overdrive. It's giving you a very good idea of how your tone controls are set, what your speakers sound like, and it also gives you a good idea of what your guitar pickups sound like. Now, some people, they like to push the boundaries a bit, and they like to set their clean tone on the edge of breakup. What that means is you raise the drive, and you get a little tiny bit of overdrive, and that usually happens when you hit a chord hard or you really dig in. And that's a taste thing, and that brings me back to this question. What makes a good clean tone? Well, that depends. It's very much dependent on the style of music that you're playing. A great blues clean tone is very different from a great jazz clean tone and a great heavy metal clean tone. What you can do, you can get familiar with the leading players in the style of music that you're playing, certain style of music, or your favorite guitarist. Setup can give you tons of great information on the gear that you need for a great clean tone. We always start at the amp. A good clean tone is very amp dependent. So let's talk about some of the classic clean tones. Every amp has a clean tone. It doesn't matter what amp that you use. Even high gain amplifiers, they have a clean tone without the gain. Most popular clean tone by far is the Fender Blackface clean tone. It's bright, but it's not too bright. It doesn't have a lot of mids to it. And because of that, it sits well in a mix with other instruments. It has a nice solid low end too. Usually it's from a tube-based amplifier, not all the times, but it gives it a warm, gives it a very pleasing sound. And what I've found is it always works, never fails. You could play blues, rock, country, or jazz, and you've heard pros use this sound. Another clean sound that's overlooked a lot is a Marshall clean sound. Marshall amps are based off the older Fender Tweed circuit, and that has a little bit more defined mid-range. Marshall, what do you think about when you think of Marshall? They're known for their heavier crunch sound. But the clean sound is perfect for rock music and even for blues music. I've seen some really great players use Marshall clean for blues music. Another one that's talked about a lot, played a lot, the Vox clean, Vox amplifier clean sound. It's a great choice for rock. It's a great choice for blues. Country music especially is made popular by the Beatles, Queen, Brian May, Tom Petty. It has a very jangly top end. It's very different than your standard Blackface sound. It's a great alternative if you want something that's a little bit not the norm. These are all tube amplifiers. But what if you didn't want to deal with that? What if you didn't want to deal with the maintenance and the weight of tube amplifiers? What if you wanted to go solid state? The clean solid state sound, it's been around for years. It's nothing new. The Roland JC120, it's a staple for jazz players, as well as the clean tone of choice for heavier bands. But it's had a bad reputation. A lot of the older solid state amps, they sounded kind of sterile. They didn't have a lot of that sound that you're looking for, because in the beginning there was a lot of terrible amps that were put out in the early process. Solid state amps can also have modeling technology built into it. That way you have many different choices of simulated tube amp sounds. And if you're new to guitar, new to tone, this is great for you. People who are just starting to learn about the differences between amps and what they like to sound like. Final clean amp choice and is no amp at all. So for years, guitarists recorded, performed with direct boxes. And that's where you plug straight into a recording console or straight into the PA system, and it lets you know exactly what your pickups sound like without being changed by the tone stack, by the preamp of the amplifier you're using. It's a very different sound. And you're probably used to what an amplifier sounds like, but this is a good learning experience to try out. People like Nile Rodgers, Prince, Billy Gibbons, Eddie Van Halen. These are all pro players that in their recordings they get some really cool clean tones from just going direct. Using those as far as getting a simulated amp sound, going directly into a recording console or the board. Tech 21 has kind of started it all. Those are analog boxes, and they give you a simulated cranked up amp sound. But also Line 6. A lot of you have these Line 6 practice amps that have a lot of different sounds, different amps that are modeled. Well, you could also plug straight in with those. Those are great ways to get it amp-like clean sound, and you're going direct. Big thing that plagues players, that's not easy to say, is when they want to set up their clean and even other tones, is that they set them up at home and they bring them to the stage, and you expect it's going to sound great. Unfortunately, it rarely ever works that way. When you're home, you're not pushing your speaker. And when you get to gig levels, the amp responds differently. And when your amp responds differently, all your settings, all your choices, they're going to have to be adjusted. They don't really work right. Here's some of the common problems that happen when you do this, when you move your clean tone from the bedroom to the stage. First, it'll get lost. If you've got a lot of bass and it's super sucked out mids, it's really easy for the other instruments of the band to drown you out. And finding your place when you've got a loud band, it can be very difficult. I find I have to up the mid-range a lot. And I find when I bring things from home and it's new gear and I go and play out, I get lost in the mix a little bit. I want to stand out a little bit more. I want to be heard without being so loud that it's annoying. But also the bass. Because you're playing at home and it's such a low volume, the low end of your tone suffers. And that will cause you to crank the bass. But then when you take that same amp live and you're at full volume, your speakers are capable of a lot more bass then. So if you kept that same setting, your tone's going to have way too much bass in it. You're going to sound muddy. You're going to get lost in the mix. So at the gig, make sure you adjust your lows and your mids for clean tone. Okay, so we're going to take a quick break here. That's part one. And we're going to go over to the chat and we'll talk a little bit about clean tone there. So let's see here. Okay, so it looks like the delay is gone, hopefully. Kevin's here. Missed yesterday's hangout because I was floating in a unicorn tube on the lake. Awesome. That's great, man. Living the dream. That's right. That's right. Hey, he's back. Hey, Kenny. Kenny's here. How you doing? Matt's here. Great to see you, Matt. Chris says, all good. Cool. So yeah, a lot of this is some of the things that we went over the weekend in our hangouts a little bit. I got inspired by that. I thought, if we're talking about it, I'm sure that some people were out there who listen to the podcast are want to know a little bit more about setting, why we picked the clean, crunch, and the lead. A lot of people go for the big effect sounds early on. They go for a lot of the reverbs, a lot of ambient stuff, the delays and everything like that, and the actual core tone gets lost. And so I think this is pretty important to go through. Okay, get a little bit of water here, and we'll start talking about crunch tones. What's your favorite crunch tone, everybody? What do you use for your distorted rhythm tone? All right. So I'm going to head back in. We're going to do part 2. All right, here we go. Crunch. What's a crunch tone? This is a tone that's been pushed. It's been pushed into overdrive. Classic rock songs use crunch tones. That's going to be your main rhythm sound. It's best described as a distorted rhythm. Crunch tone will have more sustain than a clean tone, but less than an all-out lead or distortion sound. You can get a crunch tone with pedals. Came about by running an amp hard and pushing it past its happy, clean sound. And Marshall amps are famous for their crunch tones. First way to achieve a crunch tone is by pushing the amp with pedals. So how will we do that? We'd use the easiest way is to use a boost pedal. And what does a boost pedal do? It does just what its name implies. You've probably seen a lot of boost pedals, they just have one knob on them, which is volume. What it does is it boosts the signal coming in. Can't get any easier than that. When your amplifier gets a super hot signal from your guitar, it starts to clip, and you can adjust the level of the boost to get more or less crunch. It's pretty easy to do. Overdrive pedals do the same thing, but they do something else as well. It'll have the sound of a clipped amp, usually on a drive knob or something like that. So you can run your amplifier quietly and you'll still get crunch. You'll still get that sound that you're after. Is it as good as cranking your amp up? Probably not, but overdrives get better and better all the time. They're a lot better from when I first started, and they can be very convincing. The other way that you can get a crunch tone is by rolling back the volume when you're playing into a highly distorted amp. Volume knob is your best friend as a guitar player. The less input the amp gets from your guitar, the less distortion gets through. It makes your volume knob very important tone tool. If you set up your lead tone first as distorted and loud as you're going to use it, just by rolling back your guitar's volume knob, you can experiment with many, many different tones as you roll back, even all the way to clean sounds if you have the right amp. Let's talk about some people who play this way. The Allman Brothers, Jimi Hendrix, lots of classic rock players, lots of blues players. They use this technique, get wonderful results. With the roll of the knob, you go from clean to crunch and back. You don't have to tap dance on your pedals, and it really doesn't take a whole lot of effort. So let's talk about lead and distortion. Like a clean tone, it's very style dependent. A blues lead tone is going to use a lot less gain than a hard rock tone. A jazz lead tone is going to mostly deal with volume and not so much gain. But the most important part is the need to be heard. This tone is going to have some sort of a volume jump. If you're a lead guitar player during your solo, you're the melody, you're the main thing. You're temporarily replacing the lead singer. So you need to be able to rise to a volume that's pretty similar to that. If you're not a rhythm player and you're not concerned about lead guitar, and it depends on your style, you still might need a loud or a distorted sound for certain parts of songs, certain types of songs. The main problem with these sounds is that a lot of players go too far. When you add a ton of distortion, and that also depends on the style of music too, it's easy to lose the tone of your guitar. It just sounds so distorted, you can't even tell what type of guitar you're using. Now remember, volume and distortion, they are not the same thing. Let's talk about lead guitar. If you're a lead guitarist, a very important thing to think about is the vocal quality of your tone. Think about what tone is going to sound full to you, what tone is going to grab people's attention. If your lead tone has really scooped mids, it may struggle to cut through when you have a full band, even if you have a lot of volume. So how do we get one? How do we get a good lead tone? So just like a crunch tone, the easiest way is to use pedals. In the same way that Overdrive pedals will add clipping, there are other pedals that are made to add a lot more distortion to it. Saturation, also add more volume. You can use them right in front of your clean tone. But you can also do something called stacking pedals. And that's where you're going to push one pedal with another one. You're pushing your already driven, say your crunch tone, and you can push that with another pedal. It'll add a very pleasing lead tone from a clean amp. You'd have your clean amp, you'd have your overdrive, and you'd have your lead, or maybe another crunch pedal, a boost, or distortion in front of all of them. And as they go through the chain, they're pushing. About setting your amp up. Okay, here we go. We're back. Let's talk about setting your amp up for a great lead tone first, and then rolling back your volume. And when you do roll that volume down, you can get all of the other sounds. You can get your crunch and you can get your clean. If you've got a high gain amp, it's super easy to do. You just get your distorted lead sound, set that up as your basic core tone, and roll your volume back. Give it a try. Not having to fool with the pedals, and having your volume knob and your tone knobs on your guitar to control everything can lead to really, really, really cool tones. If you notice, I haven't talked about reverb, haven't talked about delay, haven't talked about chorus, haven't talked about any of the other cool ambient or modulation sounds. Those are all dependent on your core tones. And when you take the time to get these 3 core tones dialed in first, this will give you all the tools you need to build many, many cool tones with all sorts of other effects. So next week, go ahead and tune in next week. We're going to do more about that. And if you didn't get a chance to listen to last week's podcast, we are in the middle of our summer guitar tone challenge. And this is where we're all taking some of the free time we have and we're working on our tones. The members of the community, they're all sharing all their tones in the Play Guitar Facebook group. And if you'd like to join the challenge, or if you just want to be nosy and check out the other guitar tones, head on over to playguitargroup.com and sign up. We would love to have you there. Well, that is my overview, a little bit shorter today, overview of the 3 basic guitar tones that an electric guitar player needs to have to build a solid, usable group of tones. I went over what clean, crunch, and lead tones are, and several different ways to get them for your style of music. I hope you got a lot out of them, and I'm going to go ahead and call it for today. So that's a wrap. Thanks for joining me today for the Play Guitar Podcast. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast player. Also, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a review for the show. If you're just starting out or you're new to the guitar, head on over to starthereguitar.com. Check out my premium 11-week beginner's course. That course gives you the foundation you need to move forward correctly on the guitar. Follow me on all of my different social media pages. Links to them are at playguitaracademy.com. Thanks again, and I will see you on the next episode. And what we're going to do here is I'm going to go through some tones a little bit here. And we're going to take a look at it. Let's get the chat back up here. So that was cool. That was, I wanted that one to be a little bit shorter episode. I don't know, what, about 25 minutes, something like that. Let me check the chat first before we go through some tones. David says, I always thought clean was just trying to duplicate an acoustic guitar. Maybe at first I think so. That was what they were trying to do. But clean sounds, especially electric clean sounds, kind of have taken on a whole thing of their own. Kenny says, don't know how to get it. Always been a problem with me, but I've always been third rhythm guitar. That's tough when you have a lot of other rhythm guitar players and how to set out. Mids are really important with that, Kenny. Cutting through so that people. So have you ever gone and seen a band and they have a lot of guitar players, and you can hear none of them are louder than the other one, but you can distinctly hear all the different players, and that's tone. That's really making sure that you that in the sonic spectrum of the band. That you have your place. You're occupying frequencies that no one else is really occupying. When I used to play with EG, it was really as simple as, we were both using Fender amps and Stratocasters at first, and it was as simple as me switching to a Les Paul. And once I did that, because the Les Paul is a much thicker sound. It's got more low mids to it. That was kind of my place in the band, and it worked out really well. Even though I wasn't really a Les Paul player, that's all I played there, because for that band, for that group of people, that's where my guitar stood out the most, and I didn't have to overpower everybody. It set in pretty good. David says, I have a crunch setting on line 6, but I've never used it. It could be cool, man. I know that you like Joe Satriani. You can use your crunch setting and then put a pedal in front of that. And I know that Joe Satriani uses the Boss, was a DS1. He's got some other stuff now too. Let's see what pedal Joe's using right now. Let's see his pedal board for the most recent pedal board. Yeah, they're not showing. It's got a prototype on this one. I know he has a signature one too. I don't know, but get the old Boss, the old Boss DS1. I just looked it up. They're $50 new now. You can get them used for a lot less than that, and you can put that in front. And that's what Joe Satriani does. He always uses 4 pedals. He doesn't use big racks and all that fancy stuff. He uses a Marshall set to a almost a crunch to on the edge Breakup, and then the DS1 in front of it. And then he also has some delay that he plays through too. And with your guitars that you have, that would be a great way to go. It's not really expensive to get into. I get a used one on eBay for like $25 or something like that, and it sounds good. The one that I have, the Boss DS1 that I have, I never had to mod it. I was going to do a lot of stuff to it, and it worked out great. Chris says, on my Marshall, it's about a 45 gain on the drive channel, and will most likely change to a bridge pickup and roll off the. Yeah, actually, it's like change to the bridge pickup and roll off. with the volume. Yeah, I like your Marshall tones. I forget the actual amp that you own, but I like the and all the tones that I've heard of Chris's are from the a low powered inside stuff. I'd love to hear. Have you gigged that Marshall yet, Chris? Before all this mess happened, did you get to take that out and play it? Evan says my little orange gets crunchy with the gain at like 9 o'clock. Doesn't need much. Yeah, those are little flamethrowers there. And that David says that's my favorite tone is a distorted lead. Yeah, and Joe Satriani's tone is not just him plugging into an amp. His tone is always a pedal in front of an amp. And some people think, well, that's cheating. You know, you should buy a really expensive amp and it should be able to do everything that you want it to do. But it's not the same sound as a pedal through an amp. There's tons of very famous guitar players who their signature sound is a pedal, the combination of a certain pedal through a certain amp. So I would try that out, man. I would if I was, next time you're into buying some guitar gear, I'd get just a cheap DS1 pedal and put it in front of that crunch sound, and we'll show you how to. They tend to be bright, and Joe Satriani doesn't run them. He doesn't run them real bright. He rolls the tone down a little bit, but all of a sudden, all those those harmonics that he gets start just popping out, and you start to realize, oh, that's why he uses this pedal. Let's see here. Chris says, for lead, I will roll up the volumes and use a pedal for more gain and sustain. Boost mids and volume on EQ boost pedals too. Yeah, I didn't mention EQ pedals because a lot of people a lot of people kind of use them incorrectly or are not sure how to use pedals. They get a little confused about how they work, and the way Chris uses them is really smart. I've used to use them that way too. So I'd use it as a boost pedal, but when you can still EQ that boost. So if you're hearing something you don't like, the things that I use the EQ pedal for the most was taking things away. I found that when I boosted, especially in the high gain setting, when I boost the mids, and that's a neat sound too. It's almost like a wah-wah pedal that's not being rocked back and forth. That's just stationary on a mid thing. But when I would hear something, like when I boosted it, I took the EQ pedal and I'd push the gain up so that you're slamming the amp or the pedal, whatever it's in front of. And then if it didn't sound, if it was too woofy or something like that, I'd take some of the low mids out, or maybe if it was too bright, I'd take the highs out. It wasn't adding extra noise, because a lot of EQ pedals, they'll add hiss and they'll add noise and those things. But you could kind of sculpt your sound a little bit more. And, always that putting mids in there too really helps get that too. Free time is when non-musicians sleep. That's right. Get up early or stay up late. The problem with staying up late and playing and practicing and playing music is that when your day is slam packed all day, are you really getting better? I know I had to switch mine to. I used to love to play at night. I'd stay up all night playing. I guess because I was gigging all the time, I was used to that schedule. And then when my days got much busier, I had to switch it to mornings because I'd be practicing like this. 7 says, I just realized 9 sounds high, but the gain starts at like 7. Yeah. Kenny says, what did I get your attention about, Kenny? Be good to hear your tones in a Facebook group. I posted some cleans already, so we'll target some crunch next. Yep. That's, I think this week we're going to do a lot more in the Facebook group about it. This was a super weird week for me this week. I didn't have as much time to get everything together as I would have liked to. Matt says, thoughts on getting good tones from bridge pickup through the neck pickup. on my Sheridan, each pickup seems to need slight tweaks on the EQ. Yeah, they're not the same. I would use your tone knobs on your guitar a good bit. I know bridge pickups. I know strats on all my strats. On my bridge pickup, I make sure that I move the tone pickup that's on the middle to the bridge. And even on humbuckers, which usually already have a now sometimes you have a guitar that will have a full set of pickups, but it'll have only one tone knob, a master tone knob, and that's kind of tricky. You really want one for different pickups because, like you're saying, they sound a little bit different. And one of the tricks is a lot of people will do is they will run their amp bright, and then so the typical way when you plug into an amp, you turn all your knobs up on your guitar, right? Your tone all the way up, and then you dial in your amp so it sounds really nice, and then you're done. But if your amps, if one of your pickups could use a little bit more high brightness or high end, sometimes what people do is they'll run the amp a little bit brighter and roll off a certain pickup so that they match evenly. Some people don't want their pickups to match evenly. For a lot of people who buy aftermarket pickups, they have different jobs for the different pickups. So let me read that again to make sure. Thoughts on getting good tones from bridge pickup through the neck pickup. My Sheridan. So the Sheridan is the humbuckers, right? I think each pickup seems to need slight tweaks on the EQ. Yeah, and another thing that you could try that most people don't is your height adjustment of your pickup. So if here's your strings and here's your pickup, the closer it is, this changes the EQ curve depending on how far away the pickup is. And also, for the other way, if you're getting too much bass on one side, you can just lower down one side of the pickup, so that you're not getting so many woofy sounds on that, but still, so your pickup will be kind of angled from bass to treble. So those are things that, messing with the height of the pickup is a really, really, some pickups, depending on how close they are to the strings, can sound completely different from just a very small adjustment. So there's two. Get kind of get your amp a little bit brighter and use your knobs to roll that down till it sits right for each pickup, or adjust the levels of the pickup. And a lot of these that I have, well, this one down here is a ceramic pickup, and so it has the height adjustment screws on the pole pieces themselves. But the front two don't. These are vintage Stagger. So not much I can do with the front two other than raise them up and lower them down. But with humbuckers, you can mess with those with the pole adjustment pieces. Okay, let's see here. Not to perform, just to rehearse. Okay, for your Marshall. Bass goes down for starters, and then try to find the sweet spot, but only one guitar makes it easier. And go and put the brakes on. Yeah. Rehearses in with the band. Okay, well, with the band, if it was a loud rehearsal, you get good results from that. Chris says you get a good result adding mids and then taking away from the edges. That can help pop out the harmonics too. Yeah. That was back at the start of Crunch. This whole subject, Kenny says, the whole subject has been elusive. Okay. Chris says, when I think Crunch, I just think Brian Young. Yeah, AC/DC's got that. That's that Marshall Crunch. That's that Marshall Crunch. He says, sorry, Malcolm. Matt says, that's great advice on setting it up with the tone not all the way up. Thanks, Lee. Yeah, it's it's all trial and error, and what works for you may not work for somebody else. But that's a good way to go at it too. Some people, I've done a little bit with messing with the values of the pots in the guitar too. When you roll down on your tone pots, if you've got the common ones are 250Ks, 500, 300Ks, and 500K pots. And there's also sometimes people use a 1 meg pot. I know that Eric Johnson uses on his bridge pickup a 1 meg pot. The way that the taper is, it rolls off, and actually where the resistance is from the pot picks the frequencies that get rolled off. So, if you really want to get nerdy into it, you can start experimenting with different pots for your tones. And that will actually change the EQ curve of the pickup as well. So let's see here. David says, it's hard enough just to learn to play guitar, but you also have to become a tone master and a guitar technician. You don't have to. It's definitely a lot of trial and error because not everyone's the same. But what a lot of people do is that when they'll just spend money. They'll just keep spending money until they get the right thing. Buy something, return it. But if it's not right, buy something, return it. And that's one way of going at it. That just didn't happen to be the. I like to understand how things work. So I like to get into the reasons. Well, why does that work? Why does this sound good? What about this pedal sounds better than this pedal? But a lot of people don't do that. A lot of people they'll just say, I'm going to get the best guitar I can get and see if that works. And then they'll find out, well, that doesn't always work. Sometimes a much more inexpensive guitar might be better for you than someone else. So you're going to have this a bit of trial and error without having to get into taking your guitar apart and doing all that stuff. You don't have to do that. Matt says, we'll definitely try that soon. Okay, great. Dean got a business call and missed the whole podcast. That's all right, man. It's here. In fact, I think I have it set up with the DVR function. So even while it's on, you can go back and see the beginning of it. Okay, guys, that was so that's this week. I'm hoping to do a lot more in the Facebook group this week, as far as the tone challenge, and I probably might do a surprise hangout in the Facebook group. I haven't gone live in the Facebook group. I went the other day. It didn't work out, but I might do a couple live things there and try and get some of these tones from this pod here, see if I can dial them a little bit more. I found that the clean sound that I use on this, I can't beat it. As I'm going through the different clean sounds, I keep coming back to the one that I created early on. So a lot of the stuff that I'm doing, I have two basic sound. I have a Fender sound and a Marshall sound that I have on the board at all times, which is like, this is my basic Fender clean sound, which is not a Fender amp or a Fender cabinet on this. I don't even know what it is, but I had to experiment to find it. But to my ears, that's what it sounded like. And then here's my Marshall. Let me take all this. So this is my Marshall. It's set up for crunch pretty well. If I roll back to 7, it becomes very touch sensitive. If I play light, on the edge of breakup. And if I pull hard, crunch, right? And this is on my bridge pickup. Roll off a little bit more, perfectly clean. It's not a bright clean. It's kind of a marshally. Yeah, it's very usable. And just roll up. Then I was experimenting with a fuzz. That's a heavy distortion. I think I'm gonna go fuzz on the Marshall. So I'll put all of these up in the Facebook group. I'm gonna do a live stream there this week sometime. If I find I have an hour free one day, I'm gonna put it up there. Yes, Dean clients. Whew, goodness gracious. I'm glad you're moved and everything. That's great, man. I'm glad you had a good time over the weekend. It's good to see you back, Dean. That's awesome. David says it's all fun. It is. It's all fun. It's all fun. I love getting out in the garage. I don't have a garage right now, but when I did, and getting out working on guitars and stuff, that's my golfing, you know. I don't golf, I don't fish, I don't do all those things. I walk. I like walking. And I like working on guitars and amps and pedals and things it's just a different part of my brain that's not into the scales and chords and songs and all of those kind of things. So yeah, it's fun. It's all fun. And it's cool to have people like you guys that seem to be on the same wavelength there. So, okay, everybody, thanks for hanging out with me today. I enjoyed getting the podcast going, and I hope that's going to help some people kind of really make sense of the different tones that will, you know, that are really going to give them a good foundation to build from. Chris says he's enjoying the TS9 that he borrowed. It's a much better drive with the Strat. Yeah, I love TS9s. That's my that is my tube screamer of choice. I've tried some older 808s. Of course, they're all different. I tried some older 808s that didn't really work for me. I haven't tried the mini tube screamer yet, which is pretty cool. I might pick one up just for fun, just to have an extra tube screamer laying around. But I really like, and even I've tried the TS10s, you know, and the sound tank. The plastic ones and everything. I've made one or two. And TS9 always does it for me. Okay, everybody. Thank you, Evan and Chris, Kevin, David Sparrow. Good to see you, man. Thanks, Joe. Thanks for hanging out, Joe. And let's see, Dean. Good to see you. Yeah, I'm going back through here. And Kenny. Great to see you, Kenny. And Matt. Thanks everybody for participating in the chat. I appreciate it. Thanks for letting me know if everything was working okay or not. And it looks like we got us a podcast for this week. Okay. Everybody be safe. If there's anything I can do to help you with anything, you have any questions, just give me an email this week. And if not, I'll see you on Friday. Have a great week, everybody. Bye-bye.